The vast halls of Orbital Unity Station were quiet, but tension crackled in the air like static before a storm. Built after the war, the station floated in neutral space between Earth and the galactic core. It was meant to be a symbol of peace. Today, it felt more like a battleground. Commander Alara Quinn stood alone at the center of the Galactic Council chamber. Her gray diplomatic uniform was neat, her back straight, her eyes steady. Around her, representatives from dozens of species sat in their seats, some tall and scaled, others with eyes that glowed, some barely visible behind clouds of mist. But none of them made her flinch. Across from her sat High Chancellor Virex, his long silver robes flowing, his eyes cold and sharp. He looked down at the final version of the peace treaty, then slowly looked back up. "The Council finds this agreement generous," he said. His voice was smooth, but hollow. "We've allowed human access to shared trade routes and reduced border surveillance. What more could your people want?" Ilara didn't answer right away. She stared at the treaty. The words were filled with vague promises, soft language and loopholes. No mention of equal status. No permanent seat on the Council. No recognition of the role humanity had played in ending the war. She looked Virex in the eye. "Respect," she said quietly. "That's what we want." Virex gave a small dry laugh. "Respect is earned, Commander Quinn. It is not demanded." "We did earn it," Ilara replied. Her voice was calm but strong. "We fought side by side with your fleets. We held the Eastern Rim alone for 2 years when your council refused to send aid. We ended the war together, and yet here we are offered less than what we've given." Some delegates shifted in their seats. A few looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke. Ilara took a breath. She thought of her brother Marcus. He had died during the final push into enemy space. She remembered his last message. "If this brings peace, it's worth it." She tightened her hands into fists, then released them. "I've worked for this peace," she continued. "I've argued, waited, compromised. But this," she held up the treaty, "is not peace. It's silence, dressed as a solution." Virex leaned back, unfazed. "Then perhaps it is time we accept silence." Ilara lowered the treaty onto the table. "Then this is our answer," she said, turning toward the exit. "The Human Alliance withdraws from the talks. We will not return without fair terms." A hush fell across the chamber. Even the air seemed to still. Virex didn't stop her. No one did. Ilara walked steadily toward the doors. The sound of her footsteps echoed behind her, sharp and certain. As she reached the exit, she paused and spoke without turning around. "We came in peace, but we won't stay in chains." The doors slid shut behind her. News of humanity's withdrawal spread across the galaxy within hours. Human envoy walks out of peace talks. Read one headline on the Galactic News Network. Alliance leaves Council in shock. Talks on verge of collapse, said another. On Orbital Unity Station, the Council chamber stood empty. The long table, once filled with representatives from across the stars, now looked like a relic of a dream that was slipping away. Screens dimmed, voices fell silent. The hope for lasting peace had taken a sharp, unexpected turn. High Chancellor Virex sat alone in the center chair. His long fingers drummed against the smooth table. His expression was calm, but the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth gave him away. He was irritated, not worried. He didn't believe the humans would stay gone for long. "They'll come back," he said to his aide, a tall blue-skinned diplomat named Halra. "Humans are loud, emotional creatures. They'll bark, but they won't bite. Not again. They know they can't afford another war." Halra hesitated. "With respect, Chancellor, Earth's fleets are already shifting formation. Their outer colonies are reinforcing defenses." Virex frowned. "A show, nothing more." But outside the Council chamber, the situation was shifting quickly. On Earth, Commander Alara Quinn stepped off the shuttle onto Alliance ground. The air was cool. The sky above was clear, but the mood across the planet was not. She was greeted with applause. Thousands had gathered at the capital landing port. People waved banners, held signs that read "Stand with Alara and Peace with Pride." Her image was already playing across every screen, her final words in the council chamber broadcast everywhere. "We came in peace, but we won't stay in chains." Alara walked past the crowd, nodding but saying nothing. Inside she was tired. The weight of what had just happened sat heavy on her shoulders. She hadn't wanted to walk away, but they had given her no choice. Inside Alliance Command Headquarters, she sat across from Admiral Bren Callan, the head of Earth's defense fleet. His silver uniform was crisp, and his gaze sharp. "You did the right thing," he said. "I hope so," Alara replied. "But I didn't come home for war." Callan nodded. "Neither did I. But we have to prepare, just in case." Back in deep space, council members began to panic quietly. Trade routes with Earth were vital. Human science and engineering had become central to many planetary systems. Without the alliance, the fragile balance of the post-war galaxy was cracking. In private messages, some delegates whispered among themselves. The Chancellor underestimated them. "Maybe we were wrong. If Earth pulls out of all council operations, we lose more than just a seat at a table." Still, no one dared speak out loud. Later that night, alone in her quarters, Alara stared out at the stars. Her reflection on the glass looked tired. Strong, but tired. A soft knock came at her door. Her aide, Rena, stepped in. "You saw the news?" Rena asked. "All of it," Alara said. "They're calling you a hero." "I didn't do it to be one." Rena sat down beside her. "You think they'll call us back?" "If they don't," Alara said, "they'll learn what happens when you push people too far." The stars outside shimmered, quiet and cold. The silence left behind by Earth's withdrawal wasn't just political, it was practical. Ships that once patrolled the border sectors with Council allies had turned back. Science missions, joint operations, and trade agreements were all paused. Across the galaxy, systems that depended on human cooperation began to feel the loss. In the far reaches of the Varnus Belt, mining operations slowed. Human engineers, who made up a large part of the workforce, were recalled. On the medical stations orbiting Theros 9, shipments of Earth-developed medicine stopped arriving. Hospitals began rationing supplies. And on planets like Syraxis, home to smaller species within the Galactic Council, people began to whisper. Private message, secure line, Syraxis to Orbital Unity Station. "We believe Commander Quinn acted with strength and clarity. Humanity's role in the war cannot be erased. If the Council continues this path, Syraxis may reevaluate its alliance." High Speaker Nero of Syraxis. Inside her office at Alliance Command, Alara sat quietly, reading the message. A small flicker of hope passed through her. Syraxis wasn't a large power, but they were respected. If more members started questioning the Council, things could change. Her aide Rena entered, holding a datapad. "3 more messages," she said. "Private but supportive. They're watching what happens next." Alara nodded. "Good. The pressure isn't just on us anymore." But she knew support was not the same as action. Most species feared challenging the Council publicly. As long as Virax controlled the narrative, they would stay silent. Meanwhile, back on Orbital Unity Station, Chancellor Virax faced growing unrest inside the Council. In the polished stone meeting hall, once a place of confidence, the air now felt uneasy. Ambassador Krovek of the Talari Confederation spoke first. "We understand the humans can be proud, but perhaps we pushed too hard. Their departure is already causing disruption." Virax's eyes narrowed. "This disruption is temporary. Their pride will fade. They rely on us more than we do on them." Krovek frowned. "Do they, or did we simply become comfortable relying on them while pretending not to?" The room went quiet. Virax dismissed the discussion, but he knew things were slipping. The humans were not just walking away. They were pulling the threads that held the Council's web together. On Earth, Alara walked through the Memorial Park in New Geneva. The War Memorial stood tall in the center, a long black wall of names. Her brother's name was there, Marcus Quinn, She placed her hand gently on the smooth surface. "I hope this wasn't for nothing," she whispered. A small voice behind her spoke. "Commander." She turned. A young girl stood holding a drawing. It was a picture of Alara standing tall in front of the council. "My mom says you're why we still have peace." Alara knelt down and smiled softly. "Peace isn't easy, but we try. That's what matters." She took the drawing, thanked the girl, and stood up again, a little straighter. Later that evening, she stood before the Alliance leaders in the war room. Screens around them showed troop movements, trade data, and border activity. "We're not here to prepare for war," she said, her voice clear. "We're here to show we don't need the council to define our worth." Admiral Callan nodded. "And if they don't listen?" Alara didn't hesitate. "Then we stand alone with pride." Outside, the stars turned slowly. The Galactic Council was no longer united. Cracks had formed beneath the surface, small at first, but growing fast. Delegates arrived at Orbital Unity Station, with tense faces and cautious words. Conversations happened behind closed doors. The loss of Earth's support was being felt everywhere. In the main hall, High Chancellor Virix sat at the head of the table, surrounded by silence. For the first time in years, the council chamber felt uncertain. "We are still the center of galactic order," Virix said, trying to project confidence. "The humans chose to leave. We did not force them." Ambassador Krovek of the Talari Confederation leaned forward. "With respect, Chancellor, they left because we refused to recognize their status. Earth was never asking for dominance, only fairness." Virix frowned. "They demanded a permanent seat. That would shift the balance of power." Krovek didn't look away. "The balance has already shifted. The question is whether we face it or ignore it." Meanwhile, in the command center on Earth, Alara stood before a wall-sized map of galactic sectors. Colored lines marked trade routes, military patrols, and newly frozen partnerships. Admiral Callan updated the room. 3 major trade hubs have paused operations. 2 medical alliances are now requesting Earth's direct support instead of council assistance. Alara nodded. "It's working. They're realizing they need us." Rena entered the room with a datapad in hand. "We've just received word. One of the council's founding members, the Arath Coalition, is asking to speak with you privately. They're considering pulling their support from Virix's leadership." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "That's big." She turned to the room. "Let them come to us. Let them all see that we don't need to shout to be heard. Our actions speak louder than politics." Back on Unity Station, Virix's hold on power was weakening. In his private chambers, he met with his closest advisors. "They're breaking ranks," his aide Hulra said quietly. "Even the inner circle is doubting your strategy." Virix stared at the stars outside his window. "They won't survive without us," he said. But his voice had lost some of its edge. Hulra hesitated, then asked, "What if it's not about survival anymore? What if it's about dignity?" Virix said nothing. The next day, across the galaxy, a bold message was sent from Earth to the Council. "Until the Galactic Council acknowledges the Human Alliance as an equal partner, we will not return to negotiations. Our science, defense, and diplomacy will continue independently, and we invite others who value true cooperation to join us." Commander Alara Quinn, Human Diplomatic Envoy. The message spread fast. On distant worlds, people began to ask questions. Was the Council truly fair? Had the humans been right all along? Virix called an emergency session. The room was packed. Voices were louder now. The once silent delegates spoke freely. Ambassador Naro of Syraxis stood. "My people value peace. But peace must be built on respect. The Human Alliance has shown more unity and strength than we have. I say we invite them back." With full recognition, others nodded. The vote was close, but it was clear. The Council could not hold its position any longer. Virix felt the weight of the room shift. Pride alone would not hold an empire together. On Earth, Alara received a transmission marked top priority. She read it slowly. Then she looked up at Admiral Callan. "They've asked us to return," she said. "With everything we asked for." Callan raised his eyebrows. "And you believe them?" "I believe they're afraid to lose more." She stood and headed for the shuttle bay. "It's time." The shuttle glided silently toward Orbital Unity Station. From the observation window, Alara Quinn watched its smooth surface grow larger. The lights of the docking ring blinked slowly like a heartbeat. It had been weeks since she walked out of the Galactic Council chamber. Now she was returning. This time not as a guest but as a representative of a power the Council could no longer ignore. Inside the shuttle, Rena sat across from her. "They sent the full delegation to greet you," she said, checking her datapad. Alara nodded. "Good. Let them see we're not crawling back." The shuttle docked. The airlock hissed open. Waiting on the other side stood a line of council members, diplomats from the Syraxis, Talari, Arath coalition, and even the Chancellor's aide, Halra. Behind them, Chancellor Verex himself. He looked tired, less proud, but still composed. "Commander Quinn," he said, with a slight bow. "Welcome back to Orbital Unity Station." Alara met his eyes. "I return with hope, but not with blind trust." "Fair," Verex said quietly. "Shall we begin?" Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere was different. This time, Earth's flag stood tall among the others. Alara sat at the round table, not as a visitor, but as a voice with equal weight. The new treaty was ready. It had been reviewed by both sides and approved in early drafts. Now, it only needed final signatures. Verex addressed the room. "This council must learn from its mistakes. We failed to treat one of our greatest allies with fairness. Today, we correct that." He looked to Alara. "Will the Human Alliance accept this treaty? This time, as equals?" Alara stood slowly. She looked around the room. This was not the same council she left. Delegates who once stayed silent, now nodded to her with respect. "We accept," she said, "and we expect this to be more than words. Respect is not given once. It must be upheld, again and again." She placed her signature on the treaty. Others followed. When Verex signed the final page, a soft chime rang through the chamber. The treaty was complete. Later that evening, Verex requested a private meeting. They stood in the station's upper observatory, stars all around them. "I underestimated your people," Verex admitted. "Yes, you did," Alara replied, calm but firm. "I believed strength meant control," he continued. "But your strength came from refusing to be controlled." She looked at him, thoughtful. "We don't want dominance. We want dignity. There's a difference." He gave a slow nod. "Perhaps it's time I learned that." Back in her quarters, Alara finally allowed herself to exhale. Rena handed her a message from Earth. It was from a school teacher in New Geneva. "My students watched the signing today. They cheered. They said," she made them listen. "Thank you." Alara smiled. She turned to the window. The stars looked a little brighter. "We're not just part of the galaxy," she whispered. "We help shape it." Tomorrow, work would begin again. Diplomatic efforts, shared missions, rebuilding trust. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of quiet victory. Peace came quietly. No parades, no fireworks. Just the calm hum of ships returning to orbit, agreements going into effect, and cooperation beginning again. On Orbital Unity Station, the council hall was active but no longer tense. Delegates spoke more openly. Discussions now included Earth as a central voice, not just an invited guest. Commander Alara Quinn sat at her new seat in the chamber. A bronze plate had been added to the table. Human Alliance, permanent council member. It was a small symbol, but it carried weight. She had fought for this, not with weapons but with words, patience, and determination. Across from her, Verex led the day's session. His tone had changed. He was still a leader, but less rigid. He listened more. When Alara spoke, he responded with respect. The council had not been rebuilt. It had been reshaped. Later, in a private meeting room, Alara sat with representatives from Siraxis, Talari, and the Arath Coalition. They discussed new trade plans and science missions. Not once did someone talk over her or dismiss her view. She noticed. She remembered. "We'll begin joint efforts by next week," said Naro of Siraxis, with the Human Alliance as lead coordinator. Alara nodded. "We'll be ready." After the meeting, Rena caught up to her in the corridor. "That's the 6th agreement this week. You're building more than peace. You're building trust. It takes time," Alara said. "But it's possible." Back on Earth, celebrations were simple but heartfelt. Streets in major cities had banners. "Welcome back, Commander Quinn, and peace earned not given." In schools, students studied the treaty and the events that led to it. At New Geneva War Memorial, someone left a small note under Marcus Quinn's name. It read, "Your sister finished the mission. Peace lives on." A few days later, Alara stood in the observation deck of Orbital Unity Station. The stars stretched around her, distant and glowing. Ships passed slowly, calm in their orbits. She held a mug of tea, letting the warmth settle her. Virix approached. "I received a message from the Varnus Belt," he said. "They've restarted operations with Earth engineers. They asked me to pass on their thanks." Alara gave a small smile. "The galaxy is beginning to move forward again." Virix nodded. "Because you refused to accept less than what was right." They stood in silence for a moment, looking out into the galaxy they now shared as equals. Alara spoke softly. "Peace is not weakness. It's strength with purpose. And now we all understand that." That evening, Alara returned to her quarters and opened her personal log. She recorded her final entry for the mission. "Today marks the official return of the Human Alliance to the Galactic Council with equal status. We did not win through force. We won through standing firm. Peace is still fragile, but it's real. And now, it belongs to all of us." She closed the log and leaned back. The stars outside continued to shine, quiet, steady, full of possibility.